The whole festival hall was chanting one word at me, and that word was blackmailer. 1,000 phones were up. Every screen in the room pointed at my face. Behind me, the big stage display still glowed with a frozen frame of money passing from her hand to mine. To that crowd, one image was the entire story. Lydia held the microphone center stage, calm and bright, like a host welcoming everyone to the main event of the night. She had waited weeks for exactly this. Ayano had gone white beside me. The most popular girl in school, the chosen face of the festival, and she could not force a single word out in her own defense. No shouting, no begging. I lifted my head, looked straight at the screen built to bury me, and asked them one quiet thing. Play the whole recording. The hall did not know it yet, but the girl with the microphone had just walked into a trap she had built herself. To understand how, we have to go back. Weeks before that stage, before the screaming, no one in that school knew my name. I was background. I was the boy you looked past on your way to someone who mattered. It was 2 in the morning, and I was scrubbing dishes in water gone cold because the cafe boiler had broken again and nobody would pay to fix it. My hands were red and stiff. The manager dropped another stack of plates beside the sink and reminded me, without looking up, that my shift now ended later than the board said. Arguing would only cost me hours. I moved the plates, kept my eyes down, and let the words slide off me like the water did. My phone buzzed against the steel counter. A message from my mother. The rent was late again, and the clinic still wanted the rest of the money for her treatment. I read it twice. Then I folded the bill in my pocket in half, the way I always did, as if making the paper smaller could make the number on it smaller too. A late customer came in, a boy from my year in a clean uniform that had never seen a dish sink. He dropped his coins on the wet counter instead of my hand. "Be grateful," he said, not even cruel about it, just bored. "People like you should be glad of any work." He left without his change, and the change was the insult. My answer stayed behind my teeth, but I noticed his shoes were soaked through and his ride was an hour late, outside. I noticed everything. Back then, it was just a habit, not a weapon. I was a scholarship student. That word sounds like a gift. It is really a leash. One bad month, one ugly rumor, and the school takes it back without blinking once. So I counted coins under the register and learned to vanish. Being invisible was not a wound to me yet. It was a strategy. You cannot lose a fight nobody sees you in. I finished a little after 3. The streets were empty and honest in a way the school never was. No one performed for anyone out there. The cold just told the truth. Our flat was one room and a curtain. My mother slept sitting up because lying flat made the cough worse. I left my pay on the table. Quiet as I could manage, I sat and listened to her breathe and ran the numbers again. The work I had could not win this, not in time. Whatever came next, I already knew I would take it. Across town, under warm gold light, the most watched girl in school was drowning in a different kind of water. Her name was Ayano, and everyone wanted her picture. Her table was buried in desserts nobody ate and bags that cost more than my mother's treatment. Her friends laughed on cue. Their eyes never quite reached her face. Lydia sat closest to her, smiling the way a knife smiles. She leaned in and said, "The festival face of the whole school could not possibly show up to her own event alone." It was a soft sentence with a hook inside it. If Ayana was truly perfect, Lydia said, she would have someone beside her. A real boyfriend. Living proof the image was true. Mina laughed with the others, just half a second late, just a little too quietly. She wanted to belong at that table far more than she wanted to be kind. Another girl added that empty arms were not a good look on a queen. The table giggled. Ayano held her cup and smiled the smile she wore, the way I wore my apron. A younger student crept up for a photo. Ayano turned the smile on like a stage light, tilted her head, said something kind. The girl drifted off holding her phone like treasure. The smile switched off the instant the lens did. For one breath, her face was simply tired. Lydia caught that breath too. Lydia caught everything that could be used later. Lydia did not want Ayano shamed by a stranger. She wanted Ayano leaning on a plan only Lydia could approve. The dare was a leash dressed up as a friend's concern. Through the cafe window, Ayano watched a tired boy haul a sack of trash to the curb, behind a cheaper place across the street. That tired boy was me. No crush, no hero. Something useful, a quiet, invisible person she could move into an empty chair and fully control. Lydia lifted her glass and turned it into a dare in front of everyone. "If you are so perfect," she said, "then find someone before the festival, or stop pretending you can." The table went quiet, waiting to watch her squirm. Ayano's smile did not move, but her eyes were already across the street, doing the cold arithmetic of her own escape. The next afternoon, she found me in an empty corridor after the last bell, where the lockers thin out and the cameras do not reach. She did not waste a breath on hello. She checked both ends of the corridor before she spoke, the way people do when the words are worth money. That alone told me this was not a joke she would laugh off later. She told me she needed a boyfriend until the festival ended. Not a real one, a convincing one. She said it the way you order coffee, flat and completely certain. I thought it was a prank. Girls like Ayano did not speak to boys like me unless they needed a desk carried. I waited for her laughing friends to step out of a doorway. I almost walked off. Not out of pride I could afford, but because being chosen for being disposable is its own quiet slap. She saw me shift my weight and softened her voice. She said she was not asking me to like her, only to stand where she pointed and say nothing she had not approved. Easy money, she called it. Nothing in it felt easy to me. No one stepped out. Then she said the number, the exact amount she would pay, and the laugh died in my throat, because that number closed the rent and the clinic both. She explained it would be clean, the money would move as private support through her family's education fund, signed papers, official stamps, nothing that looked like cash. She slid a single page across to prove she was serious. My eyes caught the words private grant and confidentiality. Pretty words wrapped around a trap with my name inside. Then came the hook beneath the hook. If I ever exposed the deal, she said, those same papers could paint me as a boy who used a rich girl and her family's trust for money. I understood her at once. The contract was not just a job. It was a loaded gun she was handing me, and the barrel was already turned back toward my own scholarship. She watched me run the math. She had counted on the math. That was the cruel, honest part of it. She was not buying my heart. She was buying a boy who could not say no. I asked why me. She said because no one would believe I had any reason to blackmail her, and no one would care enough to ask. Invisible had finally become my price tag. She gave me until the next morning. After that, she said, she would simply find someone else. Then she walked away, heels even, as if she had not just rearranged my life. That night, I read the contract on a laptop older than the table it sat on. The screen flickered, the words did not. They were sharp and final and clearly built by lawyers. One clause said that breaking the terms could be treated as receiving support in bad faith. In plain words, the school could call it fraud and tear my scholarship away. I closed my eyes. Then I opened the last message from my mother. Do not worry, it said. I will think of something. She always said that. She never had a something. My phone lit up. Kenji, the one friend who still saw me as a person and not a piece of furniture. He could hear trouble in 3 short words and the pause behind them. He asked what I had walked into. I tried to joke it off. He did not laugh. Karume, he said, when someone offers you fast money, they are not buying your work. They are buying you. He pushed once more. The rich do not sign papers to be kind, he said. They sign papers to own the ending. Whatever I touched, I should read every single line twice. I told him there was no version of this where I read my way out. He went quiet. Then he said the thing that stayed with me. Then at least keep your own copy of everything. I looked at the folded bill, then at the contract, then at the dark window where my own tired face stared back. There was no good door in that room, only a less cruel one. I typed 2 words and sent them before I could be smart about it. I'm in. The screen said, delivered. Somewhere across the city, a rich girl let out a breath she had held. My mother stirred and asked if I was still up. Studying, I said. It was the first lie I'd told that week. It would land a very long way from being the last. We signed it on the school rooftop the next morning, where the wind ate every word before it could reach the yard below. She came with a folder and a pen worth more than my coat. She read the rules out like a timetable. Hold her hand in public. Do not argue in front of her friends. Answer her messages fast. Never ask her anything personal. The rules kept coming. Walk on her left. Carry her bag only when others were watching. Laugh in the right places. Never let anyone catch us, looking like 2 strangers. I signed. Then I added one line of my own, in my own bad handwriting. She would leave my family out of all of it. My mother was not part of anyone's contract. For half a second, the coal dropped off her face. She asked quietly if my family was really in such a bad place, as if she had not built her whole plan on that exact fact. I told her the truth in one sentence. If they were not, I would not be standing here. Her eyes went still for a moment. Then the mask slid back, smooth and practiced. She told me the story we would sell. We met at the library over a shared book. We kept it quiet because she hated noise. Simple, clean, and completely invented. I repeated it back word for word. She blinked, surprised I had it on the first pass. Most people need telling twice, she said. I am not most people, I answered, and left it there. She handed me the first payment folded in an envelope. The way you pass something your own hands do not want to remember. I did not open it. I only felt the weight of it. That envelope was the first thread of the rope they would later try to hang me with, filmed, cut, and replayed for a screaming crowd. I had no idea of that yet. She put out her hand to shake on it. From tomorrow, she said, you are my boyfriend, Karume. Do not embarrass me. Her grip was firm. Her fingers were freezing to the touch. I noticed her hand shook, just slightly, under all that control. The queen of the school was afraid of something. I filed it away without knowing what it meant yet. A convenient boy still has eyes, and I had already begun to watch. The girl with the cold hands had no idea what that habit would cost her once the festival lights came on. The first morning of the lie did not begin with a kiss. It began with a list. She messaged me the order of the whole day before I had even reached the school gate. Be at the east entrance by the second bell. Stand to her right. Take her hand without flinching. Look like a boy who had done it 100 times before. I had done it 0 times before. I stood by the gate with my heart going like a cheap engine, watching the river of clean uniforms part around the girl everyone watched. Ayano walked toward me as if the morning had been built around her, because it usually had. Then, with no warning at all, she slid her hand into mine in front of the whole yard. The yard noticed. Heads turned the way they turn at a small accident. Someone said it had to be a mistake. The school queen did not hold hands with the furniture. A boy behind me muttered that she must owe me money. He was closer to the truth than he knew, and it still landed like a slap I had to swallow with a perfectly straight face. My palm went damp inside a minute. I did not pull away. Pull. I had signed a page that said I would not, and a leash underneath it that said I could not afford to. We walked, and our steps did not agree. She went left, I went right. Our shoulders bumped like two people who had never once shared a sidewalk in their lives. She squeezed my hand, a signal. Slow down, match me. I matched. We found a rhythm by the second hallway. It was the rhythm of two strangers learning to fake a shared past. Lydia watched from the top of the steps, and her smile came slow. The way a smile comes when a person has just found the loose thread on someone else's coat. Mina drifted up and asked, careful and bright, when this had happened. Ayano gave the line we had rehearsed. We just did not want to turn the two of us into a show. We had never agreed on how we met. So when a classmate asked, we gave 2 different answers in the same breath. Ayano laughed it off. Lydia wrote it down behind her eyes. By second period, the class chat had already decided. Screenshots of us at the gate, blurry and proud. Theories under everyone. A bet, a dare, blackmail, a pity project. Not one guess was the truth, and not one guess was kind. I learned that morning that being seen and being known are 2 different things, and only one of them is safe. I said nothing through most of it, and the silence was the problem. A real boyfriend fills the small gaps without thinking. I left every gap open because I did not know how she took her tea. Lydia leaned to Maina and said it quietly, almost fondly. Interesting, she said. They look like a couple that met yesterday. Mina laughed, and the laugh did not reach her eyes. Our lie had its first real witness now. Not a teacher, not a rival for marks, a girl who collected weakness the way some people collect unpaid debts. Kenji found me at lunch with that look he gets. Half worry, half, I told you so. He had seen the hand at the gate. He had seen my face. He knew I had not told him everything. He did not lecture. He just said to remember which parts were real and which parts were paid for, and to never confuse the two. I said I would not. I was already starting to. Lydia did not wait long to test the seams. Between classes, she appeared beside us, all surface warmth, and asked Ayano one easy thing. When exactly was my birthday? Ayano froze for half a second. Half a second is nothing in a chat and everything in a lie. I felt the trap begin to close and answered for her. Before the pause could grow teeth, I gave the date myself, plain and quick, like a boy bored of being asked. Lydia let it pass, then turned the blade around. And what kind of coffee does Ayano like? For that one, I let the quiet sit, because I had just noticed something useful. Lydia was waiting for the answer too. She did not know Ayano's order either. She played the closest friend, the keeper of secrets, the one who knew Ayano best. But her eyes hunted for the same fact I lacked. The closeness she sold was partly a costume. People think the powerful know each other deeply. Mostly they know each other's prices. Lydia knew Ayano's exact value to the school. She did not know how Ayano took her coffee. I filed it beside the shaking hand on the rooftop. 2 small cracks in 2 different masks. I did not say a word aloud. Saying it then would only have warned her early. The trick with people who weaponize questions is simple. You do not need the right answer. You only need to never look like the question scared you. I had years of practice at that. Ayana recovered and named her own order, turning it into a joke about how I always got it wrong. The table laughed. The danger passed. But Lydia kept her eyes on me. She said, "Sweet as sugar, what a lovely couple, which means I get to ask you both so many more questions." It was not a compliment. It was a promise to keep digging. Walking to class, Ayano said thank you, under her breath. So quietly, I nearly missed it. Not for the coffee joke, for the birthday. For covering the gap before it swallowed us both. It was not trust yet. Trust is earned slower than that. But it was the first small debt to land on her side of the ledger instead of mine. I noticed her notice it land. The questions came faster after that. By the lockers a day later, Lydia found her angle. She asked, loud enough for an audience, where I was taking Ayano for the weekend. She listed places by name, restaurants where the bill cost a month of my wages. The kind of place that exists mostly so people can mention having gone. Students slowed to listen. I knew 2 of those restaurants by name because I had bussed tables outside one of them last summer. I had watched people like Lydia leave no tip and complain the help was slow. They were waiting for the poor boy to trip, to name somewhere cheap, or to lie about somewhere grand and get caught. Either way, the show would be the same. Me falling down. Ayana opened her mouth to cover for me. I touched her sleeve, just barely, and she stopped. For once, I wanted to answer in my own voice instead of hiding behind her script. A date does not have to be expensive, I said, if 2 people actually want to talk to each other. The hallway dropped a degree quieter. Lydia's smile thinned at the edges. She said, "That sounded like an excuse a poor boy makes." I did not argue the point. Arguing would have handed her the win. I only turned to Ayano and asked a single question. "Do you want to get out of here?" I said, not to her audience, to her. It was such a small thing that it broke the rhythm of the whole performance Lydia had built. Ayano looked at me, then at the ring of watching faces, then back at me. And she chose. She picked up her bag and walked out beside me, away from the people she usually performed for. Walking out, I felt every stare, like a hand on the back of my neck. Ayano felt them too, but for the opposite reason. She was used to being watched. She was not used to choosing. We left Lydia holding her list of grand names with no one left to impress. Behind us, I heard her say it low to Mina. He is ruining her taste, or maybe her control. That hallway was not a win. You do not beat someone like Lydia in one move. But it was not a loss either, and in that school, not losing already counted as something strange. In the stairwell after, Ayano asked why I had not simply played rich for 1 minute. It would have been easier. I told her that simple lies are the easiest ones to get caught inside. She went quiet at that. Then she said most people would have wanted the expensive story, the show, the win in front of the crowd. I said I was not most people. The line was becoming a habit. She almost smiled. Not the stage smile, a smaller one, crooked and real and gone in a blink. I pretended not to see it because seeing it somehow felt like trespassing. Ayano did not speak again until we reached an empty classroom on the quiet side of the building. Then she dropped her bag on a desk hard enough to make the legs jump. She said she was sick of smiling at people who were only waiting for her to slip. The polished voice was gone. What was left under it was just tired and very young. By the contract, I could have left. No one was watching. No one would have docked me for it. The rules only paid for the public hours, and this was not one of them. Her hands had stopped shaking, but her shoulders had not come down from her ears. She carried her whole status in her posture. Like armor, she was not allowed to sit down in public. Instead, I set a thing on the desk in front of her. A cheap bottle of water I had bought for myself after my shift, still cold from the store fridge near my flat. "You look like you need it more than I do," I said. No speech, no soft music, no clever line, just a poor boy's water on a rich girl's desk. She stared at that bottle as if I had handed her something rare, not water. Permission? Permission to be tired in front of another person without it costing her something. She asked the question quietly, almost to herself. Why don't you ask for anything in return? Everyone she knew attached a price to kindness. I had just broken her math. I gave her the only honest answer I had. Because you already pay enough to everyone all day long. She had nothing to say to that. She just held the cold bottle and did not drink from it. Before that bottle, she had been a poster to me, the face on the festival banner. After it, she was a girl who flinched at her own name when a stranger said it like a brand. She told me, almost angry, that she had not cried in front of anyone in 2 years. I said her secret was safe, since no one ever bothered to listen to the quiet kid in the corner. That made her laugh, wet and surprised. The sound did not match the famous girl at all. It matched a person. I think the contract started dying right there, long before it ended. Something shifted in that empty room that no contract had a clause for. She had hired a convenient boy. She was beginning to notice there was a person stuck inside the role. I noticed it too, and it scared me more than Lydia did. Feelings were not in the agreement, and a feeling I already sensed was the one thing they could later turn into a weapon. That evening, on a stairwell, where the cameras pointed the wrong way, Mina gave Lydia her report. She told it like gossip, not a plan, because gossip was easier to live with. She said the couple was strange, awkward in the halls, off in their timing, and that Ayano had walked out with him and come back later looking like she had been crying. Lydia's voice changed then. The warmth drained out of it like water from a cracked glass. She asked Mina if she finally wanted to be someone who was actually useful to the group. Mina tensed. She knew that exact tone. It was the one Lydia used right before she reminded a girl how easily she could be replaced inside their small, bright kingdom. Mina had grown up watching that table from the outside. She remembered the cold of it, the not being chosen. She would do almost anything to never feel that cold again. Lydia did not threaten outright. She did not have to. She only said that a seat at their table was never permanent, and that some people forgot that until it was already gone. There was a thing in Mina's past she had buried to climb into that circle. A favor faked, a name she was not born to. Lydia held it like a card she had not yet chosen to play. Mina nodded, the way you nod at a person holding something of yours over a long drop. She told herself she was only repeating what anyone could see. She almost believed it. She drafted a message to Ayano that night. 3 honest lines about being sorry for something she had not done yet. She deleted it before sending. She would delete many of those. Lydia sent her off with one instruction, light as a feather and heavy as a stone. Next time, she said, do not just tell me, watch them closer. Bring me something I can use. Mina walked home feeling the first thin crack of something she would not name for weeks. It was not fear of Lydia. It was the quiet beginning of her own slow guilt. That weekend, 2 things were true at once, and neither was safe. Ayana was starting to trust the boy she had bought, and Lydia had just turned a frightened girl into a camera. The contract was meant to be a wall between feeling and money. It was turning into a door, and on the far side of that door, someone had already begun to build a stage. Some battles you choose? This one chose me. In a cafeteria loud with trays and gossip, on a day Lydia had clearly marked on a calendar I was never shown. The cafeteria was the real courtroom of that school. Marks happened in classrooms, but verdicts on people happened here, between the trays, where everyone could watch you be judged. There was a map to the room if you knew how to read it. The center tables belonged to the chosen. The edges belonged to the rest. I had eaten at the edges my whole life. Ayano and I now sat in a strange in-between, watched from both sides. The contract had dragged me toward the center, and the center does not like a stranger sitting in its light. Lydia came to us when the room was at its fullest, which was the entire point. An attack only counts if there are enough eyes to carry the story to every chat by nightfall. She set her tray down like a queen visiting a smaller court. Two of her friends drifted in behind her, smiling on schedule. Mina was one of them, a half step back, eyes low. Two of them I half knew. The third was Mina, invisible like me before Lydia pulled her up a rung. She would not meet my eyes. I should have wondered why a little sooner. She asked brightly where Ayano and I were going for the long break. Somewhere wonderful, she hoped. Then she answered the question for me before I could open my mouth. She listed islands and ski towns and a city famous for a hotel I had only ever seen in the background of other people's photos. Each name was a flag planted on ground I could not reach. The trays around us slowed. Forks paused in the air. People who had ignored me for years suddenly found me fascinating. The way a crowd finds a man on a high ledge, fascinating. This was the trap, and it was a good one. Name somewhere grand, and she would ask one real detail and watch me drown. Admit I could afford nothing, and I was the poor boy on the queen's arm. Ayano's hand tightened around her cup. She started to answer for me, ready as always to spend her own status to cover the hole where mine was supposed to be. I stopped her with the smallest shake of my head, because 3 mornings before, I had heard something in an empty stairwell, and I had folded it up and kept it, the way I keep everything. Lydia had been on the phone there, voice low and shaking, not knowing the quiet kid, one flight down, could hear it all. Her family had canceled her own trip, cut her funding, cut her off. There had been a quiet scandal about her spending. Money run through to look richer than her house really was. Her parents had stopped trusting her with the family name and the family card. She had spent that whole call begging, and she had lost. The girl listing resorts now would not visit one of them. Her grand life was, this season, a rumor she paid to keep alive. Money was not mine. The secret was. And a secret is one currency the poor and the rich can both spend. The only question was how to spend it without spilling it on the floor. So I did the third thing. I set my fork down and answered in a flat, ordinary voice, the kind that makes a loud room go quiet to hear it. We are spending the break at home, I said, with family. A resort does not make you closer to the people waiting at home, I said. Sometimes the cheapest place in the world is the one where someone is actually glad to see you walk back in. A few students nodded before they could catch themselves. It is hard to mock a boy for choosing his family when half the room sits far from their own, the whole angle of the attack tilted. Then I looked straight at Lydia and I added the line I had held for 3 days. You understand that, don't you? I said. When the trip falls through, family is what you have left. I left her secret unnamed. I only set it on the table between us, wrapped in something that sounded like kindness, and let her decide whether to open it in front of everyone. The cafeteria went quiet in a different way than before. Several people had heard the same rumor I had. Their eyes slid from me to Lydia, running the exact math I had run in the dark. Lydia's face went red, then went very still. She could not fire back. Any sharp answer would confirm the wound. Any soft answer would admit she had nothing. I had pinned her feet to the floor. For 1 full second, the most powerful girl in the room had no move at all, and everyone saw the second happen. In a place that ran on appearances, that 1 second was worth more than her resorts. Ayano stared at me as if she had never truly looked at me before. Not gratitude, something nearer to alarm. She had hired a quiet boy and discovered a quiet boy with very sharp teeth. Mina, 2 seats down, forgot to chew. She had watched Lydia win 100 little wars in this room. She had never once seen her stand there holding a tray with absolutely nothing to say. Across the cafeteria, Kenji hid a laugh behind his hand and lost the fight with it. The sound carried. A few heads turned. I kept my own face flat, because winning loudly is how you lose later. Lydia picked her tray back up. She smiled, because the smile was the last tool she had, and said something light about young love being so very sweet. Then she walked off on stiff, careful legs. Publicly, she never stumbled. Girls like her never do. But I had taught myself to read the small things, and her knuckles stayed white around that tray the whole way to the door. The room exhaled once she was gone. Conversations restarted too loudly, the way they do after something everyone will repeat, but no one will admit they enjoyed. I went back to my food. A teacher near the wall had watched the whole thing and said nothing. Teachers had learned long ago which fights in that school were safe to notice. This one had clearly not been one of them. Ayano leaned in and asked under the noise how I had known. I told her I had not planned it. I had only listened weeks ago to a person who thought no one beneath her was worth lowering her voice for. She sat with that. Then she said, almost to herself, that I was either the safest person she knew or the most dangerous. I told her those were often the same person. She did not laugh at that. I kept that warning to myself. The same eyes that read a stairwell could read a contract, a crowd, a cut in a recording. She did not know that last part mattered yet. Neither did I. The story moved through the school faster than I could walk. By the next period, the invisible kid had become a small legend. The boy who made Lydia go silent in front of the whole cafeteria. Someone actually stepped aside for me in the hallway, not out of respect, out of curiosity, the kind that makes room for a thing it cannot quite name. It sat strangely on my skin. The attention brought no pleasure. Whatever you might expect, attention is a current. It can carry you or pull you under, and I had just made myself very visible to a girl who drowned people for sport. I thought about my mother and the bill folded in my pocket and how a clever answer in a cafeteria did not pay a single one of her treatments. The wind was loud. My life was still quiet and hard. Kenji caught up with me by the stairs, grinning and then not grinning. He said it was the best thing he had seen all year. Then he said, lower, that I had just signed my own death warrant. He meant it plainly. Lydia would never forgive being beaten in her own throne room by a boy she had filed under nothing. People like her do not lose quietly. They lose, and then they plan. I knew he was right. The wind felt good for about a minute. Then it felt like a target being drawn on my back, in a color only Lydia could see. I had traded my safety for one bright moment. Ayano found me later, and she did not say, thank you. She had no words for it yet. She only walked closer to me than the contract asked, on the side of the hall where no one was watching us. That small change said more than thanks could. For weeks, she had used me as a shield. Now she stood near me as if I might be a person worth standing near. I noticed. I always noticed. By the lockers, a girl who had never spoken to me asked if it was true I had once made a teacher cry with a single answer. The legend was already growing past the truth. Legends always do. I told her no. She looked almost disappointed. People wanted me to be a secret genius, a hidden prince. The plain answer that I just listened harder than the rich did was less fun to repeat. Mina watched all of it from a distance, her phone gripped in both hands as if it might jump away. She was not recording yet, but she was learning the shape of what would be worth recording soon. After the last bell, Lydia did not go home to the house she could no longer brag about. She walked to the empty festival committee room and shut the door behind her very softly. On the table sat the list of candidates to be the face of the school festival. The name at the top in the committee's neat hand was Ayano. It had been Ayano for as long as anyone remembered. To understand Lydia, you have to understand what that title was. The face of the festival stood before the sponsors, the parents, the school council. It was not a sash. It was a doorway to everything. Whoever held it was treated as the school made flesh. Recommendation letters wrote themselves. Doors that stayed shut for the rest of us simply opened. Lydia had wanted that doorway her whole life. She had clawed to second place and found there was no way up while Ayano stood in the light. You cannot replace a queen by being slightly less of one. You replace her by proving she is a fraud. There were sponsors who funded the festival each year and expected a flawless face to shake their hands. A scandal at the top would let Lydia step forward as the safe, clean replacement. Lydia looked at that name for a long time. Then she closed the folder slowly. The way you close a thing you have already decided to burn. The school will just pick the pretty doll again, she said. Mina, brought there without being asked if she wanted to come, said carefully that Ayano had not actually done anything wrong. It was the bravest sentence she had managed in months. Lydia turned to her without hurry. She reminded Mina how fast the group forgot a girl who stopped being useful. She did not raise her voice. Lydia never needed to raise her voice to draw blood. She brought up, lightly, the old thing in Mina's past. Not as a threat, as a memory shared between friends. That was worse, a threat you can refuse. A memory like that just sits there and waits. She believed something simple and rotten. That status is power. That controlling a person's image controls the person, that feelings are only a soft spot to press. She was about to test that belief on me. Then she said the sentence that turned a grudge into a campaign. If I can prove her perfect little love is bought and paid for, she said, then that seat at the very top finally becomes mine. Mina understood in that closed room that there was no door left for her. To stay safe, she would have to help. To help, she would have to betray. The bill for her seat at the table had come due. Lydia handed her the task like a present that could not be returned. From now on, she said, you watch them every day, where they go when no one is meant to be looking. Bring me all of it. Mina nodded. Of course she nodded. And under the nod, the girl she used to be tried one more time to speak up and was, once again, told without words to stay quiet and stay useful. Mina drove home with her brother that night and stared out the window the whole way. She kept telling herself she could do this halfway. Watch a little, report a little, hurt no one too much. Walking home that night, I did not know about the committee room. I did not know about the list or the task or the small machine Lydia had just switched on inside our school. I only knew I had won something in the cafeteria, and that winning had felt, under the rush, a little like stepping into a clearing and hearing the whole woods go suddenly silent around me. Ayano messaged me that evening. Not a rule, not an instruction. Just a question, are you home safe? I read it twice, the way I read my mother's messages, and I did not know what to do with it. The contract had no clause for someone asking if you got home safe. That became the trouble with this arrangement. It kept growing parts no one had agreed to, and no one knew how to undo. I wrote back that I was. She did not answer. Did not. But the small gray word delivered sat there on my cracked screen, and for a moment, my one room felt slightly less like the bottom of a well. 2 campaigns started that day, though only one of them knew it had begun. Lydia was building a case. I was just trying to get a girl home safe and keep my mother's lights from going out. By the time I understood we were even in a war, the trap would be loaded, the camera chosen, the stage already booked. But that comes later. First came the watching, and the watching came for us both. The watching began in a place with no cameras. Lydia knew the school better than the people who ran it, knew every blind corner, every room a lens could not reach. She chose the changing room behind the festival rehearsal hall after the others had gone. She set her phone face up on the sink, screen bright, and waited for Mina to see it. Mina almost did not come. She stood at the door for a moment that could have changed everything. Then she went in, because a frightened person walks toward the one who scares them, hoping to be spared. On the screen was a piece of Mina's past, an old message, a faked recommendation, a name Mina had borrowed to climb into a circle she was not born into, proof of who she had been. Lydia did not say a word about it at first. She fixed the ribbon on Mina's festival sleeve, gentle as an older sister, and let the bright screen do the threatening for her. The room smelled of floor cleaner and old sweat. Mina said later that was what she remembered most. Not the threat, the cleaner. The mind keeps strange things from its worst days. Then she said it would be such a shame if people remembered who Mina used to be. Not a threat. A weather report. A statement about which storms were possible if Mina disappointed her. Mina's mouth went dry. She had spent 2 years burying that girl. She had changed how she spoke, how she dressed, who she sat with. all so she would never be that girl again. Lydia watched the fear do its work and then offered the cure, which was also the disease. Just be useful, she said. Bring me things. Stay close to them. That is all I am asking, really. Lydia had a gift for making a cage feel like an embrace. She praised Mina's loyalty while describing the exact way that loyalty would be spent. Mina heard both halves and chose to hear one. She gave Mina the assignment in a kind voice. Today after class, she said, those two will be on the roof. I want to know exactly what they say to each other when they think no one can hear. Mina wanted to say no. The word was right there in her throat. But the screen was still glowing on the sink, and the bottom always felt one wrong word away. She said yes instead. She told herself it was only watching, only listening, only carrying back what she heard. As if a knife stays innocent until the hand decides to push. She knew better. She did it anyway. None of that had reached me when Ayano found me on the roof that afternoon. To me, it was only the one place in the school where the air did not seem to belong to anyone watching. The roof was supposed to be locked. A while back, Kenji had quietly shown me the trick with the door, a tech volunteer's small kingdom of keys. It was the one space in the school that felt like air. She came up the stairs without her stage face on. Her shoulders were down. Her smile, the one she wore for the yard, had been left somewhere on a lower floor. The first thing she did was take off a thin gold pin Lydia had made her wear to rehearsal. She held it in her palm like it weighed too much, then put it in her pocket out of sight. I had started keeping a quiet list in my head of the things forced on her. The gold pin, the schedule, the friends who watched her like auditors. None of it was Ayano. All of it was costume. She said, looking at the city instead of at me, that some days she hated even her own name. Because no one said it like a name anymore. They said it like the label on something expensive. Rushing to comfort her would have sounded like a thing I wanted paid back. I just sat down on the cold concrete beside her and let the wind do the talking for a while. Then I said it the way I saw it. In my world, people wear roles too, I said. The good son, the quiet student, the cheap worker who never complains. We just cannot afford the nicer costumes. The only real difference, I said, is the price tag on the mask. Yours is gold. Mine is the apron I clip on at the cafe. But under both of them, a person is still only trying to breathe. She asked if I really believed that, or if it was just a nice thing poor people told themselves. I said I had to believe it. It was the one thing the rich had never managed to take off me. She turned and looked at me, then really looked, and she laughed. Not the stage laugh. A real one, surprised out of her. The kind that does not check. First, whether it is allowed. It changed her whole face. For a moment, she was not the festival banner or the queen or the contract. She was a tired girl on a roof who had just remembered laughing was free. Behind the rooftop door, where neither of us could see, Mina stood with her back to the cold metal and listened. She had come to spy. She had not expected to hear two people being real. I think some part of Ayano knew the door was not as empty as it looked. She lowered her voice near the end without saying why. We were both learning to feel watched before we could prove it. She heard the laugh. She heard the quiet between our words. She was close enough to understand a thing Lydia had not planned for. Whatever this was, it had stopped being fake. Her phone buzzed against her hip like an insect. A message from Lydia. 3 small words that made the whole roof colder. Record it, it said. If you hear anything I can use. Mina looked down at her own thumb, hovering over the screen. She did not press the button that day. She told herself that meant she was still a good person. She was already learning to lie to herself. The next morning, Lydia tried a sharper edge, and she tried it in public by the festival sign-up stand, where a crowd was guaranteed. She had stopped expecting me to simply break. She looked me up and down, slow, and said I seemed tired. Then she asked sweetly if it was hard work. Karume climbing all the way up to Ayano's level every day. A few people snickered on cue. It was a good hit. It named the gap between us and dressed it as concern. The old script said Ayano would pretend not to hear, the way she always smoothed these things over with a blank smile. I had learned to take these hits the way you take cold water, without flinching, because the flinch is the show they came for. I kept my face still and waited to see if Ayano would too. This time, Ayano refused to pretend. She stopped, turned and took my hand in front of everyone, deliberately, the way you plant a flag. Then she looked at Lydia, with no warmth at all left in her. "Lydia," she said, "your envy is getting tiresome." That was all. 6 quite words. But in the grammar of that school, it was an act of war, and everyone standing there heard the declaration. The little crowd went still. Ayano had never spent her status on me before. She had borrowed mine when it suited her, but she had never stood in the open and paid for me with her own. Lydia's face did the thing I was learning to watch for, the half second where the mask slips before the hand catches it. She smiled it away. But the half second had happened, and people saw. She recovered and said something about how cute it was that Ayano was so protective. Then she left, and her walk was a fraction too fast. I had learned to read her walks by then. Ayano kept hold of my hand for 3 more steps than she needed to. When she let go, neither of us mentioned it. Some things you ruin by naming them out loud too soon. Ayano did not notice Lydia stop behind us. She was too busy being surprised at herself, at the warmth of her own small rebellion. I noticed. By then I read Lydia the way you read weather turning. What I did not see was Lydia stand very still around the corner, looking at the spot where Ayano had held my hand. When she finally spoke to Mina, her voice had changed entirely. "I do not need suspicion anymore," she said. "Look at them. He has changed her. Suspicion will not move a crowd. I need proof now. Something they cannot explain and a screen can show in one frame." That evening, the roof again, because it had quietly become ours. The light went orange, then the color of a bruise healing, and Ayano said a thing I truly did not expect. We did not touch. That is the part people never believe. For all the rumors that would later fill that screen, the truth on that roof was 2 people sitting a careful foot apart, just talking. She told me plainly that when she first picked me, it was because I looked invisible and easy to control. A safe boy, a boy who would do the role and never reach for more than the money. She said it without flinching, looking right at me, because she had decided she was done lying to at least one person in her life. And she said she was ashamed of it now. I let the words sit. They should have hurt more than they did, maybe because I had always known. You do not get chosen by a girl like her for your charm. You get chosen for your silence. I told her I had known from the first day in the corridor. She asked why I signed anyway. I said because my mother's lungs do not care how I am chosen, only whether the clinic gets paid. Then I told her the thing I most believed. The worst part of being used, I said, is not the being used. People will always try that. The worst part is letting it turn you into one of them. I said I had watched the cafe fill with people who had been stepped on once and spent the rest of their lives stepping. I had promised myself I would rather stay poor than become that. She was quiet a long time. Then she said she had never heard anyone talk like that, like dignity was a thing you keep even when you have nothing else. In her world, it was just a luxury good. She said she wished she had met me before all of this. I told her she would have walked straight past me, because before all of this, I was background, and she was trained to see only the foreground. The contract was supposed to keep us at arm's length. Money on one side, a service on the other. But honesty is heavier than money, and it had started to pull us toward the same center. She asked the question without looking at me. "If this all collapses," she said, "will you hate me?" Her voice was small. It was the most expensive thing she had ever said, and she knew it. I understood the question under her question. She was not really asking about hate. She was asking whether anything between us was real enough to survive losing everything it was built on. So was I. I told her the truth, which is rarely the comforting answer. "That depends," I said, "on what you choose at the moment it collapses, not on the collapse. On you, when the floor is gone." She almost argued. Then she didn't. Because we both knew it was true. And one of the new things between us was that we had stopped pretending in front of each other. That was rare. That was dangerous. She nodded slowly, like a person filing away a debt she fully intended to pay. The sun finished going down. Neither of us moved to leave. The roof held us a little longer, and we let it. While we sat in the last light, Lydia sat under a fluorescent one, planning the exact opposite of a sunset. The committee office, after hours, had become her private war room. She laid the problem out for Mina like a teacher at a board. If we show a chat, she said, people argue about what it means. Words can be spun. Words give the crowd room to doubt. Mina took notes without meaning to. That was the worst of it. Her hands had learned to be useful to Lydia before her conscience could vote. Obedience, practiced long enough, becomes a reflex. If we show feelings, Lydia went on, no one believes them anyway. Everyone thinks they are being played by a sad story. Feelings are weak evidence. They never move a mob the way I need them to. But money, she said, and here her voice warmed with something almost like joy. Show money changing hands, and the crowd writes the rest of the story for you, free of charge. They always do. She told Mina what she needed, not a rumor, not a feeling. A clean shot of cash passing from Ayano to me. One image. One frame the whole school could understand in a single second. Mina said it was too dirty, even for them, even for the seat at the top. It was the second brave thing she had said, and it died just as fast as the first one had, saying it cost her. You could see it cost her. But the cost of refusing Lydia was one Mina had already decided she could not pay, and Lydia had built the whole trap on exactly that arithmetic. Lydia looked at her for a long, cold moment. Dirty, she repeated. Like the word tasted good. Dirty is being poor and pretending you are one of us. We are only helping the truth find a stage. She believed it too. That was the frightening part of Lydia. She was not a girl who knew she was lying. She was a girl who had renamed her cruelty justice and slept perfectly well at night. Mina left the office with a job she did not want and a secret she could not escape. Behind her, Lydia opened a blank message and began drafting the speech she would give once the trap had sprung. When she pays him again, Lydia said to the empty room, "You will be there, and the camera will be steady. And then we will finally see who the school really wants standing at the top." Then she said the part she had not planned to say aloud. "I gave them their perfect couple," she murmured. "Now I will give the school its perfect scandal, and both will have my name underneath them." None of this reached me that night. I went home, counted my pay, sat with my mother while she slept, and felt, for the first time in years, like maybe the bottom of the well had a ladder in it. The timing was cruel. Just as my life began to feel less like surviving and more like living, a frightened girl was being taught to point a camera at the proof of it.
Look at how clean her hands stay. She never holds the knife herself. She finds the most frightened person in the room. She teaches their fear-depressed record. Two people finally being honest with each other. A lens, paid for in fear, aimed straight at it. Remember her smile right now. You will want it later.
She saw Ayano by the gate alone for once, and her feet started moving toward her. She had a sentence half built in her mouth. Something true, something that would have broken the whole plan. Mina had rehearsed it on the walk to school. 3 sentences. He is paid. Lydia is using me. Please be careful. Simple. True. She lost her nerve the way you lose your footing on ice all at once. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down. It was the old photo again, the proof of who she used to be, sent with no words, because no words were needed. The threat was the image itself. A second message landed under it. "Today," it said. The envelope, "Do not fail me." 3 short lines that turned her half-built sentence to ash before she could say it to Ayano. She stopped walking. Ayano glanced over, saw Mina, and smiled at her, easy and warm, the smile of a girl who still believed Mina was her friend. That smile was the worst part of the morning. Lydia appeared at Mina's shoulder as if she had been waiting. She said she was not asking for anything terrible. She was only asking Mina to film a little truth. Just point and capture what is real. Mina understood the trick even as it was done to her. The thing she filmed would be real, and then it would be cut until the real thing told a lie. Truth edited is the cleanest weapon there is. She wanted to warn Ayano. She looked at her once more. But the photo was still warm on her screen, and the bottom of the social world still yawned under her feet. She turned away instead. That same hour, 2 floors up, Ayano sent me a message of her own. After class, it said, "I need to give you the second part of the payment. Routine words. A small bomb with a delay on it. I read it between periods and felt nothing alarming. We had done this before. The fund moved money, I signed, the clinic got paid. I did not know a camera had already been promised my face. We met after the last bell in a quiet corner of the yard, near the technical entrance where the festival crews stored their gear. It was private. That was exactly why she had chosen it. The festival crews kept their gear there, half-built stages and coils of cable. It looked like a backstage. In a way, it was. The most important show of the season was about to be filmed right in front of it. It was a mistake, though neither of us knew it then. Private is just another word for unwitnessed, and unwitnessed is where the dangerous footage gets made, because no one is there to say what really happened. Ayano held the envelope a moment before she gave it to me. She said she hated this part. Every payment, she said, dragged her back to the day she first decided to buy a person. Her hands were steady when she gave me the envelope, but her eyes were not. She had started to hate her own plan more than she feared losing her crown. I could see the trade happening in her face. I told her I had signed it too. I was not innocent, but signing a bad deal does not make the deal pretty. And we both stood there in the ugliness of it without looking away from it. She apologized, not the polished kind, the kind that costs something. She said if she could go back, she would not have chosen me because I looked convenient. She would have just asked. Those words mattered. In the full truth of that corner, this was a girl returning a kindness, ashamed of a contract, trying to become honest. The money was almost beside the point. She told me she had set a date in her head to end it all properly. After the festival, she said, contract torn up, everything square. Even if she lost her crown for it, she meant it. I believed her. But from where Mina crouched, behind a stack of festival crates, the lens told a thinner story. An envelope, cash, 2 tense faces, none of the words. The words were the first thing the camera lost. I felt it before I understood it. A prickle on the back of the neck, the same one I got in the cafe when someone watched me without paying. I turned my head toward a small sound near the crates. Here is the thing about being watched your whole life from the bottom. You grow a sense for it. I had felt that exact prickle from managers, from rich customers, from teachers deciding I was a thief. There was nothing there that I could see, just stacked boxes and a slice of shadow. Mina had pressed herself flat and gone still. I saw nothing, but I marked the angle, the spot, the feeling. I kept it from Ayano. I did not want to frighten her over a shadow, but I filed it the way I file everything. And a filed thing in me does not get lost. It waits quietly until it matters. Ayano left first. I stood a moment longer looking at that stack of crates, trying to name the wrongness. I could not. But I knew, the way you know rain is coming, that the air had changed. Behind the crates, Mina's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She had the shot. She had heard the apology too, every word of it. The apology did not fit the plan at all. She could have deleted it. Her thumb hovered over the trash, the way it had hovered over record. Then another message from Lydia arrived. Just a single question mark. And the fear answered for her. She sent the video. Here, she typed. Now leave me alone, as if a person who hands a loaded weapon to a hunter can simply walk away and not be part of the kill. She would learn. We all would. Mina sat through her next class. With the sent video burning in her pocket, she kept thinking the worst was over. She had no idea the worst was a thing Lydia was still building, frame by frame. That night I went to Kenji's because the prickle on my neck would not leave. And Kenji is the one person who treats a bad feeling as data instead of nerves. His room was the opposite of magic. A cheap desk, 2 old laptops, a tangle of festival gear he was fixing as a volunteer. No secret genius cave. Just a careful boy who liked things that could be proven. I told him about the corner, the sound, the way Mina had been awed for weeks. Too close and too far at once. He did not tell me I was imagining it. He picked up a pen and drew a circle. He asked me to tell it again, slower, and this time he wrote down the small things. The time of day, the exact corner, which way Mina had been awed. Boring details. Boring details are what win these things. In the circle he wrote names, Ayano, Lydia, Mina. Then around them, the things that bound them. The festival, the contract, the seat at the top. He tapped the page. Follow the want, he said. Who wants what? Lydia wants Ayano's place, he said. Mina wants to keep her seat. And you just want to not drown. The only person here building towards something public is Lydia, so picture it from her side. For the first time, I understood Lydia as a planner, not just a mean girl. She was not trying to embarrass us. She was running a campaign for a job, and we were the obstacle in its way. He asked the question that reorganized my whole fear. What does she need, he said, to make a crowd believe something in 3 seconds? Not 3 minutes, 3 seconds. Before anyone can think, I said it slowly because saying it made it real. Money. She needs money on a screen. A poor boy taking cash from a rich girl. The crowd finishes that sentence before you can open your mouth. Once I said the word money out loud, the whole plot snapped into focus like a lens turning. Every odd thing fit. The corner, the crates, Mina's eyes. They had not been collecting gossip. They were collecting an image. Kenji nodded like a doctor confirming a thing you hoped he would deny. Then it was probably filmed, he said. Today, in that corner, the thing you felt was a person, and the person had a phone. Panic never arrived. Panic is a luxury for people who have time. Instead, I felt the strange calm I get when a vague dread finally takes a shape I can fight. A shadow you can name stops being a ghost. We laid it out together. If Lydia had a clip, she would not use it in a hallway whisper. She would wait. She would want a stage, an audience, a moment too big to take back. She would want the festival. Kenji said the thing that became our map. If she is building a show, he said, the file has to exist somewhere before the show. And anything that exists on the festival system, I can at least see. We were not the heroes of a thriller that night. We were 2 poor kids at a cheap desk, choosing to fight a girl with money, status, and a head start. Saying yes to that was the bravest thing we did. He did not mean breaking in. He meant his real, boring, legitimate access as a tech volunteer. The festival ran its big screen off a media panel, and Kenji helped run the media panel. That was our door. Kenji set one rule that night and never broke it. We use only what I can legally see, he said. The second we cheat, we become her. And a truth pulled out by cheating is a truth a crowd can throw away. I went home with less fear and more weight. The threat had a shape now. It had a method. It had, almost certainly, a file with my face in it, waiting in the dark for a crowd to be gathered around it. Lydia watched the video alone in the committee office, with the lights low and the door locked. She watched it the way a jeweler studies a stone she is about to cut down to size. Instead of gloating like villains do in stories, she worked, quietly, neatly, late into the night. That is what made her dangerous. She treated cruelty as a craft, and she was very, very good at it. The first time through, she frowned. The apology was in there. Ayano's voice, soft and guilty, saying she would have just asked. That sentence ruined everything, so she decided to remove that sentence. Watch what she did to that apology, because it is the whole crime in one move. She did not add a lie, she subtracted a truth. The most dangerous edits are the ones that only ever take things away. She found the cut points with a patience that should have frightened anyone watching. She trimmed the front. She trimmed the back. She kept the envelope, the cash, the tense faces, and nothing else. Then she went hunting for a still frame of my face. She found one where the light was bad, and my expression was flat. The careful blankness I wore to survive rooms like hers. She froze it there. A poor boy with a cold face, she said to the screen, almost tender. You look exactly like what the school is afraid of. She did not see a person. She saw a role she could cast me in. Mina was there, against her own wishes, summoned to watch her own work be sharpened into a blade. She asked Lydia, quietly, not to show it in front of everyone, to find another way. Any other way. Lydia answered without looking up. The truth should be useful, she said. What good is a truth that just sits in a drawer being true? She believed that. That was the rot at the very center of her. She opened a draft on her laptop. A speech. Mina could read the top line over her shoulder. We cannot let fraud stand as the face of our school. Calm words. A noose with very good posture. Then she renamed the file so it would sit in the festival list, looking like the main event itself. The final cut. Nothing in the name that anyone scanning the schedule would ever pause on. She saved it twice. She closed the laptop. She smiled at Mina, warm again, the danger tucked away, and said what a good friend Mina had been. Mina went home and did not eat that night. 2 files now existed in the world, aimed at the same evening from opposite directions. Lydia's cut, sleeping in the festival system, and the whole true memory, still only living in 3 people's heads. That night, sleep barely came. I lay in my one room, listened to my mother breathe, and ran the shape of it again and again, looking for the move that turned a frame into a trap of our own. By morning, I had the beginning of an answer, and it was a strange one. We would not try to stop the show. We would let it happen. Because the only way to kill a lie in public is to let it walk on stage first. The media club met in a low room behind the auditorium, full of cables and dead monitors and the smell of warm electronics. To the school, it was nothing. To us, it became a command post. Kenji had a key to it as a tech volunteer, the same way he had a key to the rooftop. The school handed small powers to quiet, reliable boys, and never once thought to watch what we did with them. He pulled up the festival material schedule on a club laptop. Not private messages, not hidden accounts, just the public job board of the event, the list of clips queued for the big screen. From the audience, the festival looked like magic, lights and music, and a flawless screen. From the back, it was cables, schedules, and tired volunteers, like almost everything else in the world. As a volunteer, he could see who uploaded what and when, and a few plain technical facts about each file. He could not read anyone's heart. He did not need to. The facts would do the talking. Kenji's access stayed boring and clean. He never hacked a thing. He looked at what his volunteer role allowed him to see, and the counterattack was built from that plain, permitted access. I told him what I expected. Lydia would not choose a whisper. She would choose a stage. She would want a moment where Ayano could not walk away and I could not explain fast enough to matter. Kenji asked how I could be sure she would go big instead of just spreading a rumor. I said, because a rumor makes you a gossip. And Lydia did not want to be a gossip. She wanted to be a hero with a stage. The festival was that moment. One big screen, one captive crowd. Parents, sponsors, the whole school in one place, primed to watch whatever the committee put in front of them, built for an ambush. I had spent my life learning how powerful people think because the poor have to. You study the ones who can hurt you. Lydia had never once had to study me. That gap was the only edge I owned. Kenji scrolled to a folder marked for special materials, dance clips, sponsor logos, a welcome reel, and one file uploaded from an account tied to Lydia with a name too plain to be honest. The plain name was The Tell. People hide things in plain sight when a strange name might get noticed. She had made it boring on purpose. Boring is a kind of camouflage, and I had learned to see through it. He did not click it. We had a rule. He only looked at what the system showed him by right. But the name sat there in the list, calm and ordinary, pretending to be part of the show. She has already uploaded something to the main screen, he said quietly, days early. Who uploads the centerpiece of their attack days early? Someone very sure no one is watching the back end. Lydia's first real mistake was trusting the system because she owned the people at the front of it. She forgot the back end was run by boys she had never bothered to see. Ayano did not know we were doing any of this. I had decided not to tell her the whole plan, and that choice sat heavy in me. A secret you carry to protect someone is still a wall between you. Kenji warned me not to get cocky over one file name. A file is not a confession, he said. We have a thread, not a rope. Pull it wrong, and she feels the tug. So we pulled it carefully, the way you draw in a fish. The next evening we went deeper, still without cheating, which mattered more to me than it might sound. A truth dragged out by breaking rules is a truth a crowd can wave away. We needed clean hands. Kenji opened the format check panel, a boring tool volunteers use to make sure clips would actually play on the big screen. It does not show content. It shows the shape of a file. Its bones. I asked him to explain it like I was slow, because in his world I was. He said every video carries paperwork inside it. When it was made, how long, how many times it was changed. The file keeps its own diary. The bones told a story by themselves. Lydia's file had been re-encoded, trimmed, uploaded more than once. each version a little different. And the original source had a different name and a different length, re-encoded, trimmed, uploaded again. Each of those is a fingerprint. A clip pulled honestly from a phone does not look like that. This one had been worked over by someone who wanted a very particular result. He laid the numbers side by side. The final clip was shorter than the source by almost a full minute. A minute gone. I knew exactly whose minute it was. It was the minute Ayano spent apologizing. That cut minute was the whole case. In the source, there was context, a contract, a sorry. In the final, there was only money and a cold face. She had not lied with new footage. She had lied with scissors. Kenji saved everything the panel let him save. The upload log, the timestamps, the account, the mismatch between the long original and the short final cut. Dry data. Dry data is what survives a courtroom. We did not touch the file. We did not move it or change it. We only wrote down what the panel already told us. The way a witness writes down a license plate. The clip stayed exactly where she left it. He said the line that became our weapon. If we get the full version up on that screen, he said, her edit falls apart in about 10 seconds. The crowd does the rest the moment they see the gap. Then Kenji went still. The festival system kept automatic version history so volunteers could restore broken uploads before a public screening. Lydia had uploaded the raw source first, then replaced it with the cut version, never realizing the panel preserved the earlier file as a rollback copy. Using that version history access, Kenji saved the untouched raw file to 2 school-approved backup drives. We had the whole truth now, the apology and all. What we still lacked was proof of why Mina had ever filmed it, so we set out to record the hand, not by sneaking a camera into a private place. I would not do that, and Kenji would not let me. We did something slower and legal and far more patient than that. I had noticed a pattern. Lydia liked to corner Mina near the technical zones, the corridor by the media club, the sound bays. Few students went there, but a committee girl had every right to be there. And the festival material was already uploaded. So Lydia had no more use for gentle. The closer we got to the day, the more she needed Mina silent. She would press her again, soon, and right there. Kenji had a sound check to run, a real one, on his actual schedule, testing the stage microphones against the corridor speakers. Leaving a mic live during a level test was the most ordinary thing in the world. I need to be careful how I say this, because it matters. We recorded a public corridor during a scheduled test, with a microphone the school had placed there for that purpose. We bent nothing. We only listened. We did not aim it at anyone. We set the levels, started the test, and let an open microphone do what an open microphone does in a public corridor. Then we waited in the booth with the headphones on. It did not take long. Lydia walked Mina into that corridor within the hour. Voice low, thinking the tech zone was empty because the tech kids were beneath her notice. She had never once looked at our faces. I held my breath in that booth. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that the prickle had lied, that Mina was just a sad girl and not a weapon. Then Lydia opened her mouth, and the last of my doubt went quiet. We heard all of it. She told Mina that if the festival went wrong, the whole school would learn who Mina had been before the circle took her in. The old secret, named out loud at last, on a live feed. Mina begged her to stop, and Lydia said the sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. You have already betrayed her, she said. It is too late to be good. Now at least do not betray me. Hear that, the way Mina heard it. It is too late to be good? Lydia did not just threaten her. She convinced her the door to decency was already shut. That is how you keep a frightened person obedient. In the booth, I did not smile. Kenji looked at me, waiting for some sign of triumph. There was none. I only said 3 words. Save it twice. He did. 2 copies, in 2 places, the only way to keep a thing safe. Because I had heard something under the threat. Mina was not a villain. She was a girl held over a drop by the same hand that held me over mine. The recording proved Lydia's crime. It also proved Mina's cage. Mina came out of that corridor white as paper, not seeing us behind the booth glass. For weeks, I had thought of her as the traitor. In that moment, I saw her differently. I saw someone already drowning. I thought about the cafe, about the nights I begged no one in particular for the shift to end, for the rent to wait 1 more week. I knew the exact sound of a person being squeezed. Mina was making it. That changed my plan in a way Lydia never could have guessed. I no longer wanted to destroy Mina along with her. I wanted the truth to free the one and bury the other. Those are not the same act. I went home and could not call the recording a victory, though it was one. It was also a girl I used to ignore, begging in a hallway, learning her fear, had a price tag, and Lydia held the receipt. Late that night, in the media room, Kenji laid out the simplest option. He could quietly pull Lydia's file from the queue. One deletion, the ambush would never play. The danger would just vanish. It was a good plan, Kenji's plan, the safe one, the one any sensible person would take. Delete the file, sleep easy, let the festival pass. I understood exactly why he wanted it. I still could not take it. I told him no. He stared at me like I had lost my mind, and maybe I had, but I had a reason. Erase her clip, and Lydia would not stop. She would become the victim of censorship and strike again later. Worse, she would be believed. A girl whose evidence vanished from the tech crew the night before the festival. The school would whisper. The poor boy's friends had hidden something. We would lose the story. There was only one way to kill this for good. Let her carry her own lie onto the biggest stage in the school, in front of everyone she wanted to impress, and let her press play on it with her own hand. A lie deleted is a rumor forever. A lie performed in public, then broken in public, is dead. I did not want to stop the show. I wanted the show to happen, then to take it from her in the light. Kenji said I sounded like Lydia for a second, talking about letting people walk into traps. That landed hard. I told him the difference was the truth and who it freed. He said he hoped that difference was real. So we built an order. Let Lydia show her cut first. All of it, no interruption, then the full recording, then the technical proof of the edit, then the audio from the corridor, each one heavier than the last. The order was everything. Show the proof too early, and the crowd is still angry and will not hear it. Show it too late and the damage is done. We mapped each beat like a heist, because in a way, it was one. Kenji asked the only question that mattered. Can you stand there, he said, while the whole school screams that you are a blackmailer, and wait for the right second, not flinch, not explain too soon. The hardest part was not the proof. We had the proof. The hardest part was that I would have to let Ayano believe for a few real minutes that I had failed her. I could not warn her without warning Lydia too. I thought about every room I had ever been the lowest person in. Every insult I swallowed to keep a job, a scholarship, a roof. I had been training for that stage my whole life without knowing it. Kenji asked what would happen if I broke, if my voice shook, if I explained too soon, if the crowd's noise got into my chest. I told him then we both go down and Ayano with us. He nodded and stayed anyway. She wanted a show. I said, she will get one. Kenji almost laughed, then didn't, because we both knew what it would cost if my timing was wrong by a moment. There would be no second take on that stage. We shook on it the way Ayano and I had once shaken on the contract, except this handshake was free and chosen and pointed at something I actually believed in. That was a new feeling. I held on to it. We arranged the files on the laptop in the order they would play. The cut, the full version, the data, the audio. I looked at the last one for a while before I named it. The whole truth, final. I closed the laptop on those 4 files like closing a door on a loaded room. Everything we had was in there. Everything Lydia had was already on the festival system. The only thing left to decide was the timing. The day before the festival, I walked the empty stage once, alone, while the crews were at lunch. I stood where Lydia would stand. I looked at the rows of empty seats and let myself feel how big it would be. Then I walked to the spot where I would stand in the crowd, low and unseen, a blackmailer in everyone's eyes for as long as I let them believe it. I practiced being hated. It is a skill. I already had it. Lydia thought she was the one setting a trap. She was, but she had built it in a house whose back rooms belonged to us, with a frightened girl whose fear we could now prove on a stage we had learned to run. She had a trap. We had a trap around her trap. And the terrible, beautiful part was that she would spring ours for us, with her own hand, in front of every single person whose opinion she had ever cared about. Sleep did not come that last night. I sat with the contract in one hand, the thing that started it all, and thought about how a page meant to buy my silence had taught me, instead, exactly how to speak.
She still thinks she is the hunter here. She built her trap with great care and patience. She does not know she built it inside our house. Every reveal is loaded and quietly waiting. She will walk out and pull the trigger herself, in front of every person she ever wanted to impress. Do not look away from the second the room turns.
The day before the festival, the school changed its weather. You could feel it in the halls, a low electric hum of something coming, the way animals go quiet before a storm they can smell. I had felt this kind of pressure before, but never aimed at her. Aimed at me. Yes, the poor kid always knows when a room is about to turn. Watching it turn toward Ayano was a new and ugly thing. The word had spread that Lydia had something planned. A main event. A secret she would show on the big screen. No one knew the details, which only made the rumor grow teeth and travel faster. Rumors in that school were a kind of currency, and Lydia had spent a fortune seeding this one. By the festival, the crowd would arrive already hungry, already half-converted, already wanting a villain. Ayano heard it everywhere. And the strangest part, she told me, was that the crowds no longer parted for her the way they always had. People looked, then looked away, already deciding something. She had spent years as the still point the school revolved around. Now she felt the ground tilt under that. The first cold hint that the room had begun, quietly, to choose someone else's story. Ayano kept her chin up through all of it, the old training holding even as the ground shifted. But later she said the worst part was not the whispers. It was not knowing which friend had started them. She asked Lydia outright what was happening. Lydia smiled and said the festival should be a place where the truth about people finally comes out. Then she touched Ayano's arm, gentle as poison, and left. I had learned to translate Lydia by then. The truth about people meant her truth, her cut, her version. She had wrapped a personal ambush in the language of honesty, and most of the school would not hear it. I watched Mina that day more than anyone. She avoided Ayano with a new desperation, taking long ways around, eating elsewhere, holding her phone in both hands like it might detonate in them. Mina looked like a person carrying a glass of water across a tightrope. Every step careful, every muscle tight, terrified of the moment it spilled. I almost pitied her. I would have if Ayano were not the floor below. I knew what was on that phone, or guessed close enough. I said nothing to Ayano. Telling her would only pour fear into a girl already at the edge, and fear makes people move too early. So I lied to the person I had finally stopped lying to. Not with words, with my calm. I let her think I was as blind as she was. The alternative was handing Lydia a reason to change the date. Nothing in those days was harder than that discipline. To know the shape of the blow coming and keep my face calm so the people swinging it would not change their aim. I held the secret like a coal in my fist. Kenji messaged me once that afternoon. "Everything ready," it said. "Just hold the line." I deleted it the second I read it. In those last days, I trusted nothing to a screen because screens were the whole war. Late in the afternoon by the rehearsal hall, I saw Mina stop. She looked at Ayano across the corridor, and she took one step toward her, slow, like a person walking toward a cliff. To do a brave thing, I watched that single step and held my breath. Part of me wanted Mina to do it, to confess, to end the danger early. The colder part of me knew that if she did, our whole trap would never spring. Mina had decided. Somewhere in that terrible day, the guilt had finally grown heavier than the fear. She caught up to Ayano in the quiet corridor by the library, and her voice came out shaking. "I have to tell you something," she said, "about the festival, about what Lydia is going to do." Ayano stopped walking. She heard the tremor and turned, and for a moment the whole plan hung by a thread. For 1 second, the whole future balanced on Mina's tongue. If she had said the next sentence, Lydia's stage would have collapsed before it was ever built. History turns on seconds like that, and usually loses. Mina's face was doing the thing a face does right before it confesses everything. Mouth open, eyes wet. The old secret and the new betrayal both rising up at once, ready to spill onto the floor between them. And then Lydia came around the corner, as if she had a sense for exactly these moments, because she did. She smiled the warm public smile. But her hand closed around Mina's wrist, and her fingers dug in hard. "We are late for rehearsal," Lydia said brightly, for anyone passing, and she steered Mina away by that gripped wrist, still smiling, the way you remove a child from a room before it says the wrong thing. To everyone in that hallway, it looked like two friends late for practice. That was the horror of Lydia in one image. Her cruelty always wore the face of something ordinary, something no teacher would stop. Mina looked back over her shoulder at Ayano. The confession was right there in her eyes, but the grip was tighter than her courage, and she said nothing, and the corridor swallowed the moment whole. Ayano stood there, alone, holding a fear she could not name. She did not know the details, but she knew now that Mina was afraid of Lydia and that the fear was about her. The circle had a knife in it. Around the corner, out of sight, Lydia leaned close to Mina's ear. "One more attempt," she said, soft as a lullaby, "and you fall with them." Then she let go of the wrist and smoothed Mina's sleeve, gentle again. Mina walked into rehearsal with that lullaby threat in her ears and the last of her resolve in pieces. She had tried to be good. She had been stopped at the door of it again. The next chance would have to be public. Ayano found me on the roof that evening, and she was not the queen anymore. Her hair had come loose. Her eyes were red. The polished girl from the banner had been worn all the way down to the person underneath. I had seen her tired before on this same roof. I had never seen her like this. Tired is a state. This was a surrender. She had decided somewhere on the stairs up to stop fighting for the crown at all. She told me she had lain awake doing a kind of math she had never done before. Not what will I lose, but what is worth losing. And every time she ran it, the answer came out the same. And the answer was the crown. She said she wanted to end it. All of it. The contract, the lie, the festival. She would go to the administration tonight and tell them the whole thing was her idea, that she had paid me, that I was innocent. "Do you understand what that would do?" I asked her. She said she did not care. Let them take the festival, the title, the friends. None of it had ever loved her back. She would not trade my future for a costume. She was ready to burn her own name to the ground, to stand up in front of the school and admit the perfect girl had bought a boyfriend. If that confession could keep my scholarship safe. She meant every word. A few weeks earlier, she would have died before saying that in front of anyone. Status was her whole spine, and here she was, ready to snap it in half on purpose to keep one poor boy out of the fire. And that was the moment I understood how far she had come. The girl who chose me because I was disposable was now ready to make herself disposable to protect me. The contract had inverted completely. I did something then that was not in any agreement. I put my arms around her. Not for an audience, because there was none. Not for the role, because the role was already dying. Just because she was shaking. She froze, then held on. I told her the truth I had been carrying. "When you first chose me," I said, "you chose me because I was convenient." She flinched. I kept going. "But that is not what is happening now. Now," I said, "you are choosing me even though it costs you everything. That is the opposite of convenient. That is the first real choice either of us has made since the day you stopped me in that corridor." She tried to argue that, real or not, it changed nothing about the danger. She was right. Choosing each other did not delete a single file, but it changed why I was going to fight. That mattered more than she knew. "So I am not going anywhere," I said. She cried then, not from weakness, but from the sheer relief of being held up by someone who was not asking for a receipt. I felt years of performance leave her shoulders. For all her money, no one had ever just held her up before without sending a bill afterward. I could feel how strange it was to her, how she kept waiting for the catch, and slowly stopped waiting. I thought about my mother then, oddly, about how she had held me up my whole life and never once handed me a bill for it. I had just learned that from her and was passing it to a girl who had never seen it. I did not tell her about the files. About Kenji, the metadata, the corridor recording, the order we had built. I could not. If she knew, her face would change, and Lydia read faces better than anyone alive. The cruelest part of my plan was that the person I most wanted to comfort with the truth was the one I could not tell. I had to let her walk into the fire half blind and trust that I had built the exit. So I gave her the only thing I safely could. "It is too late to cancel," I said. "The show is going to happen. But I need you to trust me. Whatever you see up there, do not break. I will not let you fall." Trust me is the most expensive thing you can ask a person who has been used. She knew that. I knew that. And she gave it anyway, to a boy who would not explain the night before the worst day of her life. She looked at me, searching, the way you search a frozen lake for the part that will hold your weight. Then she nodded. She decided to trust a boy who would not explain himself. It was the bravest thing she did. She asked me one thing: "Promise you have a plan." I could not lie to her, not anymore. So I said, "I have a plan, and I have Kenji, and I have something Lydia does not." She did not ask what. She just breathed. We sat with our backs against the low wall, the city humming below, two kids who had started with a contract and ended up here, promising each other things money could not touch. The roof kept our secret, as always. We stayed up there until the light went. Below us, somewhere in the dark of the festival grounds, a microphone crackled and a voice counted into it for a sound check. The stage was waking up. It was almost time. While we sat on the roof, Lydia stood backstage in her element, calm as a surgeon who has already decided the patient will not survive. She moved through the chaos like she owned the chaos itself. She found the tech team and asked sweetly that her file be played right after the welcome speech. Prime time, the moment every eye would be on the screen. The team nodded. One of them was Kenji. The welcome speech droned on out front, all sponsors and school spirit. Backstage, the real event waited in a file with a boring name. 3 people who knew what it was, and 1 girl who had no idea she was the target. He stood there in his volunteer shirt, holding a clipboard, and did not let a single thing show on his face. He noted the file name. He noted the slot. He said, "Sure, of course," and wrote it down like nothing. Imagine the nerve it took for Kenji, a quiet volunteer, taking orders from the girl he was about to help destroy, writing her ambush into the schedule with a steady hand. He was braver that night than I was. Inside, his heart was going like a drum, because this was the confirmation we had needed. The exact moment, the exact slot. Now we knew when the lie would play, which meant we knew when the truth had to answer. We had feared she would change the plan at the last second. Play it early, play it late, do something we could not answer. Instead, she handed Kenji the timetable herself. The trap now had a clock we could both read. Mina stood near the curtain, gray as ash. Lydia drifted over and fixed her collar, the way she fixed everything. A small act of ownership, dressed as care. She felt Mina shaking and only smiled wider. Lydia mistook Mina's shaking for nerves about the big night. She had no idea it was grief. The girl beside her was not afraid of the plan failing. She was sick at the thought of it working exactly as designed. After tonight, Lydia murmured to her, Ayano stops being untouchable, and everyone will remember who finally told the truth. She believed she was about to be reborn as the school's hero. She had no idea. She had a speech ready about honesty and the good name of the school. She had practiced it. She was going to call her ambush a public service, and 1,000 people were going to believe her for about 10 minutes. Mina said nothing. She had run out of brave for one lifetime. She just stood there, let the collar be fixed, and watched Lydia walk toward the stage. Microphone in hand, smile aimed at the gathering crowd. Then the welcome speech began. Far away and bright through the curtains. Lydia squared her shoulders, fixed her own perfect smile, and stepped out into the light she had spent all year learning to command. None of them, not Lydia, not the crowd, not even Ayano beside me, knew the night had 2 scripts. Hers, written to crown her, and ours, written quietly in a media room, waiting under the floor of hers like a fault line. Down in the crowd, I found my place near the front, where Lydia could see me, where a blackmailer belonged. I took Ayano's hand. I felt her grip me back, terrified, trusting, and I kept my face perfectly still. Kenji took his place at the technical desk, a thumb resting near the controls that would decide everything. We did not look at each other. We had said all of it already. Now there was only the waiting. The welcome speech ended. The crowd settled. The big screen brightened, and Lydia raised the microphone, looked straight at Ayano, and said, "Sometimes the prettiest love story is just the most expensive lie." The screen behind Lydia glowed blank and blue, and the whole festival hall went quiet to listen. She did not rush. People who think they have already won never rush. She spoke about honesty, about how a school should be a place of truth. Not pretty pictures and borrowed images. She said it kindly, like a warning given for our own good. I had heard this speech in pieces already, in the corridor recording, in the draft on her laptop. Hearing it out loud, dressed for a crowd, I understood how good she was. She almost convinced even me. She avoided names at first. The crowd leaned forward, the silence stretched, and everyone in that hall started hunting for the guilty before she pointed. Beside me, Ayano's hand closed around mine so hard it hurt. I did not let it show on my face. We had agreed without words that whatever came, I would be the calm one. So I was calm. My heart was not calm. Let me be honest about that. It was slamming. But I had learned long ago that fear lives in the face and the hands, and if you control those two, no one ever sees the rest. Across the hall, at the technical desk, Kenji stood with his hand near the controls, looking bored, looking like a volunteer waiting for a cue. Only I knew what that stillness was costing him. At the edge of the stage, half in shadow, Mina stood shaking. She looked like the only person in the building who knew exactly what was about to happen. Because she was. I looked at Mina and felt the strangest thing. Not anger, a kind of pity. She was on that stage the way a hostage is in a photo. Present, terrified, and not really free to be anywhere else. Lydia let the quiet ripen. Then she turned to the big screen and delivered her line. Sweet and sad and rehearsed. "Look," she said, "at who we almost made the symbol of our festival." She wanted them to wait, to hunger, to build the appetite before the meal. A crowd made to wait for a villain will accept almost anyone you hand them. She had studied this. So had I. And every eye in that hall, 1,000 of them, turned from her to the screen, and then, as the image loaded, began to turn toward me. The trial had started, and I was already the accused. The clip began to play, and it was good work. I will give her that. It was a very good lie. From the first frame, it was built to make a crowd hate me in under 3 seconds. There I was on the giant screen, my face flat and cold, the careful blankness I wore to survive. My mouth moved, and the cut made it look like I was saying the words, "You will pay." I had never seen my own face that large. It did not look like me. It looked like the boy Lydia needed me to be, the cold, poor stranger every comfortable family quietly fears. She had cast me perfectly. Then Ayano, on screen, pressing an envelope of cash into my hands, her face tight. No sound of the apology, no context, no contract, just money, and a cold boy, and a frightened rich girl. I knew that envelope. I knew what it was really for. But the screen does not carry knowing. The screen only carries the picture, and the picture said exactly what Lydia had taught it to say. The hall made a noise I had never heard before, a low collective gasp that turned, almost instantly, into something with an edge. 1,000 people deciding together in a heartbeat that they knew me. Lydia spoke over it, gentle and damning. Ayana was pressured, she said, used. Karume saw a lonely girl and turned her kindness into a leash. We trusted him. Look what he did with our trust. The word came from the back first. Blackmailer. Then it was everywhere. Hissed and shouted, a tide of it. Someone called for the school to pull my scholarship. That one landed exactly where it was aimed. Pull his scholarship. I heard that one clearly, through the noise. That was the knife, not the word blackmailer. The thing underneath it, the thing that could end my mother's treatment in a sentence. This was the part Lydia had built the whole machine for. Public death. The poor boy exposed. The crowd as judge and executioner. The verdict already in before a single true word had been spoken. Ayano started to step forward. I felt her decide to throw herself between me and the crowd. I held her hand and, very slightly, pulled her back. Not yet. If she spoke first, they would only pity her. Ayana was shaking with the need to save me. I squeezed her hand once, a signal we had never agreed on, but that she understood anyway. Hold. Trust me. The hardest word I ever asked her to believe was wait. They would say the poor boy had manipulated even this, her defense of him. The only voice that could break this was the accused one, calm, unafraid, asking for the one thing a liar can never allow. So I let it get worse. I stood in that storm of my own name turned into a curse, and I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I waited. I let them hate me all the way to the bottom. I had practiced being hated my whole life, in the cafe, in the halls, behind the register. Every swallowed insult had been a rehearsal for this exact moment, and I had not even known it. Then, when the noise was at its peak, when Lydia's smile was at its widest, I let go of Ayano's hand. I told her, with my eyes, to hold on, and I started walking, calm and slow, toward the stage.
Look at the whole crowd right now. Every single one of them is sure. They have the wrong man and total, roaring confidence. He is walking straight into it on purpose. He wants her certain. He wants them loud. The louder the lie gets, the harder it falls. Watch what one quiet question does to this whole room.
I climbed the steps to the stage, and the booing rose to meet me, and I let it. At the top, I turned and faced them. 1,000 furious faces lit blue by my own frozen image above me. The booing followed me down the row and up the aisle. Parents pulled back as I passed. A teacher would not meet my eyes. I walked through all of it toward the stage like walking into a cold wind. Lydia held the microphone like a trophy. She did not want to give it up. But 1,000 people were watching, and refusing the accused the right to speak would have looked like exactly what it was. Instead of taking the mic instantly, I looked up at the screen, at the cold boy frozen there, and asked the room a single quiet question. Interesting film, I said. Interesting. Why did it start in the middle? Why did it start in the middle? 7 words. I did not raise my voice. I have learned that the quietest question in a loud room is the one everyone strains to hear and then cannot stop thinking about. The hall did not understand yet, but Lydia did. I watched it hit her. The smallest flicker, the first crack, the half-second where the planner realizes the plan has a hole she did not check. If the truth is on your side, I said, the full version should not scare you. Then I looked at Kenji at the back of the hall, and I gave the smallest nod, and Kenji pressed play on the rest. No begging, no explanation. That was what they expected from a guilty person. I only offered them the rest of the film and let their own curiosity do the turning for me. The screen changed, the same corner, the same envelope, but now with the minute Lydia had cut, now with sound, now with everything she had spent all night carefully removing from the world. The crowd heard Ayana's voice fill the hall. I hate this part, she said on the screen. If I could go back, I would not have chosen you because you were convenient. I would have just asked. I had heard those words live, on a real evening, in a real corner. Hearing them again through 1,000 speakers, watching the crowd hear them, I understood the truth has a sound, and a lie cannot fake it. They heard my answer, the real one. The money is for my family, I said on the screen, but I never wanted you to think of me as a thing you bought. The cold boy had words now, and they were not a threat. The hall went silent. Not the angry silence of before, a different one. The silence of 1,000 people realizing all at once that they had been handed half a story and had swallowed it whole. I looked at Ayano in the crowd as her own apology played above us. She had her hand over her mouth. She had not known I kept the full thing. She was learning, that I had been protecting her all along, but I was not finished because a feeling is not proof. So I nodded again, and Kenji put the bones of the file on the screen. The plain, boring, undeniable paperwork of the lie. There it was, for everyone to read. The original, longer. The final cut, shorter by a minute. Uploaded days early. Re-encoded. Renamed to hide in the schedule. Not a leak. A thing built, on purpose, in advance. I spoke into the quiet then, plainly. This was not someone stumbling on the truth, I said. This was someone who filmed a private moment, cut out the part that mattered, and saved it for the biggest screen here. Lydia tried to talk over me. She said the data could mean anything, that I had faked it, that the tech crew was helping me. It was a good try, but I had saved the heaviest thing for last. I nodded one final time, and Kenji played the audio from the corridor. Lydia's own voice, clear and cold, rolled across the entire square, out of every speaker she had wanted to use against me. Here is why the audio mattered most. A cut video proves a liar is careless. A threat in her own voice proves a liar is guilty. The first embarrasses her. The second ends her. We had saved the ending for the end. You have already betrayed her, her recorded voice said, to 1,000 listening people. It is too late to be good. Now at least do not betray me. The words she used to cage Mina, now caging her. The room turned. You could hear it, an actual shift. 1,000 people exhaling and reorganizing the whole story in their heads. The villain was no longer the boy on the stage. Mina, at the edge of the stage, made a sound when she heard her own threat played back. The thing Lydia had used to own her, now broadcast to the whole school, set her free in the worst and best way at once. Lydia stood frozen in the light, the microphone dead in her hand. Her speech about honesty turned to ash by her own honest voice. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. Then Mina walked onto the stage. No one made her. That was the thing that mattered most. She walked to the microphone on her own, shaking legs, and took it from Lydia's frozen hand. I will remember the way she walked to that microphone for as long as I live. Not brave exactly. Brave is for people who are not afraid. Mina was terrified and did it anyway, which is something better than brave. It is true, Mina said, and her voice cracked on the first word and held on the rest. I filmed the video. I gave it to Lydia. I watched Ayano for her. I did it because I was scared of losing my place. Forgiveness was not what she asked for. She said she had been afraid of being nothing, and that being afraid had made her something worse. The honesty of it was almost harder to watch than the betrayal. Lydia's whole strategy had depended on Mina staying silent out of fear. She had built the cage so well, she forgot a caged thing will sometimes choose the open door, even knowing it leads off a cliff. Lydia found her voice and used it to call Mina a liar, desperate now, reaching for the old power. But the crowd had heard her own recorded words minutes ago. There was no version of liar that fit anymore. The festival committee moved to cut the show. Too late, far too late. Everything was already on the screen, already in 1,000 memories, already spreading to every phone in the hall in real time. The students who had screamed blackmailer the loudest were the quietest now. I watched a boy in the front row slowly lower his phone, unable to look at me, ashamed of the word still warm in his mouth. I watched people physically step away from Lydia, a small space opening around her on the bright stage, the way a crowd backs away from a thing it has just understood. The space was the whole verdict. I felt no joy in it. I had braced for joy, and its absence caught me off guard. Watching a person be abandoned by a crowd is not a victory you celebrate. It is just cold and final. Then Ayano climbed the steps. The hall braced for her to scream, to weep, to beg. She did none of it. She walked to Lydia and stood in front of her, calm. The crown nobody could give or take anymore. The microphone found her voice and carried it everywhere. The same speakers that had carried the lie now carrying the calmest truth of the night. She did not sound broken. She sounded, finally, free of them. You wanted my status, Ayano said, quietly, into the microphone. You can have it. I am done living for it. Take the seat, take the title, take the crowd. I do not want to be their pretty picture anymore. That blow was the one Lydia never planned for. She had built her whole war to take Ayano's place. And Ayano had just set the place down in the dirt in front of everyone, so that taking it meant nothing at all. For one moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She had wanted to belong at the top so badly that she burned down everything real to get there. And now, she stood at the top, alone, with nothing left to rule. I crossed the stage and took Ayano's hand. Not for a contract, not for a crowd. Because she had just chosen the truth over the only armor she had ever owned. And I was not going to let her stand there alone. Her hand was cold in mine, the way it had been the day we signed the contract on the roof. But this time, the shaking was not fear. It was a person who had just stopped performing for the first time in years. We walked off the stage together, through a crowd that parted now for a different reason than it ever had before. Behind us, Lydia stood alone under the lights, the very lights she had turned on herself. The committee stopped the music. The lights stayed up. People did not leave right away. They stood in the strange after-quiet of a room that has just watched its own certainty get taken apart in front of it. Winning did not reach me as joy. I felt like a person who had survived something he should not have had to survive at all. Beside me, Ayano was breathing like someone who had just set down a great weight. And somewhere behind us, the lie that was meant to end my life lay broken on the brightest stage in the school. Killed not by a louder voice, but by the one thing Lydia never thought a poor boy could keep. The festival ended, but the things it broke kept falling for days, the way a building keeps shedding dust long after the blast that hit it. The school was not the same place, and neither was I. They took Ayano's posters down from the festival board, not in shame now, just quietly, because the girl on them had stopped being the girl the school wanted to sell. She did not ask for them back. I heard a younger student ask whose face used to be on the festival board. No one could quite remember. That is how fast a school forgets a queen. The picture comes down, and the wall is just a wall. Lydia did not come to school. The word went around that her parents had pulled her papers and moved her somewhere the recording had not reached yet. She was simply gone, like weather that had passed. I never saw Lydia again. I used to imagine I would want to say something, to watch her face. When the moment never came, I found I did not miss it. She had already lost the only thing she ever wanted. There was no grand punishment, no expulsion read aloud, no villain dragged off in front of cheering crowds. Just an empty seat, a withdrawn name, and a silence where a powerful girl used to be. I walked the halls and felt the school rearrange itself around me. Students who had screamed my name as a curse now went quiet when I passed. Not from respect exactly, but from a kind of shame. One of them, a boy who had shouted blackmailer louder than anyone, met my eyes in a corridor and then dropped them to the floor. He did not apologize. He just could not look at me. That was its own sentence. I thought I would want that boy to grovel. I had imagined it on 100 night shifts. Someone who looked down on me, finally looking away in shame. The real thing was emptier than the dream. It always is. Kenji walked with me and said the strangest thing. He said this was almost scarier than revenge. To not gloat, to just walk through it. He said it made people more afraid of me than any speech could have. I told him I was not trying to be feared. I was just tired. There is a tiredness that comes after you win a thing you should never have had to fight for. I had it in my bones for weeks. The school offered me things suddenly. A spot on committees, friendly nods from people who had never seen me. I turned most of it down. I had not survived all of that to start performing for the same crowd. That afternoon my phone buzzed. A notification from the fund. The final payment had transferred. The last of the contract money, clean and automatic. I stood in the hall and looked at the number for a long time. The final payment was real money. Money my family genuinely needed. I looked at that number and felt no relief at all, because I already knew what I was going to do with it, and it was going to hurt to do. A few days later, I saw Mina cross the yard toward Ayano. No makeup, no group around her, none of the armor she used to wear. Just a girl walking, alone, toward someone she had wronged. I almost did not recognize her. The Mina who had spied and filmed and broken under Lydia had always moved like someone glancing over her shoulder. This Mina just walked, slow and straight, ready for whatever came. I stayed back. This was not mine to stand in the middle of. I watched from across the yard the way you watch something fragile, ready to move and knowing you should not. Ayano saw her coming and stopped. Mina did not perform an apology. She told Ayano she did not expect things to go back to how they were. She just wanted to say the truth once, without a stage, without a crowd, without Lydia in her ear. She had every reason to make a public show of being sorry, to win back sympathy the way Lydia won attention. She did none of it. She just told one person the truth and asked for nothing. That was new for her. Ayano listened. She did not rush to hug her. She did not soften the way the kind girl from the banner would have. She had stopped being that girl. She let the silence hold a moment before she answered. I think Ayano had decided something on that stage she never went back on. She would be kind, but she would not be soft. She would forgive, but on her own clock, on her own terms, never again, to keep the peace. Betrayal does not disappear because you confess it, Ayano said. I will not pretend it does, but your confession saved us when it counted, when it would have been safer for you to stay quiet. I know what that cost. Mina started to cry quietly, the kind of crying that does not ask to be comforted. It was not forgiveness, and she knew it. It was something smaller and more honest. It was a door left open a crack. She asked, barely above a whisper, if she might ever help them again, if there was a road back. Ayano thought about it and did not lie to be kind. Someday, she said, not today. And that was the truth. Mina nodded and walked away. Not lighter exactly, but not crushed either. A person carrying her own weight for the first time in a long while. That is what real forgiveness looks like at the start. Slow, earned. I asked Ayano to meet me on the roof that evening. Our roof, the one place in the school that had never asked either of us to perform. The wind was soft. The city was just starting to light up below us. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say on the walk up the stairs. By the top, I had thrown all of it out. Some things you cannot say in a clever way. You just have to say them plainly and mean every word. I brought an envelope. In it was every bit of the money she had paid me. All of it. The rent money and the clinic money and the price of my own quiet. Gathered back up into one thick, heavy stack. I held it out to her. She looked at it like she did not understand. I told her the contract was over and that the money should not be the thing standing between us anymore. Not now. Not after everything. She asked if I still needed it. I answered without dressing it up. Yes, I still needed it. My mother was still sick. The rent was still due. Needing it had never been the question. The question was what it would cost to keep it. Because if I keep this money, I said, then some part of whatever we are will always belong to the deal. A part of me will always be the boy you bought, and I do not want to be that boy anymore. Not with you. She understood then. This was not me being proud. This was me buying back the one thing the contract had taken. My own footing, so anything between us would grow on clean ground, and not on a receipt. Ayano told me later it was the moment she stopped being afraid of losing me. A boy willing to hand back money he desperately needed was a boy never really in it for the money. She had her proof now. She asked quietly if I would regret it, giving back money I clearly still needed, for a feeling that came with no guarantees. It was a fair question. I had asked it of myself all week long. I told her I would regret keeping it more. I would regret spending the rest of my life wondering whether she chose me or whether the contract had just never really ended. I needed to know. So did she. My mother would have called me a fool for giving it back. Maybe I was. But she had spent her whole life keeping her dignity when she had nothing else. And I had learned that lesson too well to unlearn it now. She looked at the envelope for a long time. Then she put her hand on it, flat, the way you hold something down, and slowly, deliberately, she pushed it back across the cold concrete toward me. The contract is over, she said. Then she did not pick up the money. She took my hand instead. Her fingers were warm this time, not the freezing grip from the rooftop where this whole thing began. I remembered the first time she took my hand, by the school gate, cold and rehearsed, and for the cameras. This was the same gesture and a completely different act. The hand was the same. The choice was not. I want to start again, Karume, she said. No contract, no role, no clauses, payments, or rules. Just two people who choose to be here and get to find out what that means. We did not kiss on that roof. I know that is what the story wants here. But we had spent so long being a performance for other people that we were in no hurry to perform even for ourselves. We just sat and held on. I asked if she understood what she was choosing. There would be no perfect picture beside me, no money, no status, no flawless image for the school to admire, just a poor boy with a sick mother and a night job. She said she was tired of the perfect picture. She had worn it for years and it had never once kept her warm. She wanted the awkward thing, the real one. The honest, messy, unscripted life I came from. I have spent my whole life, she said, being chosen for what I represent. The face, the name, the seat. You're the first person who ever looked past all of it and chose the girl underneath. Let me do the same. For once, no clever line came. The boy who usually had the right quiet answer just held her hand on a rooftop and let himself believe a good thing was happening to him. It had been a long time. The sun went down the way it always did over that city, slow and orange and free. Neither of us moved to leave. The envelope sat on the concrete between us, ignored, Just paper now, with no power left in it. Then she smiled, a real one, the crooked one I had first glimpsed in an empty classroom a lifetime ago. A first real date then, she said. And this time, you pick the place. I can tell I will lose that argument. I told her I would probably pick somewhere with cheap soup and cracked seats. She said that sounded perfect. And the strange thing was, she meant it, and I could tell, and that was a wealth I had never had before. The next week, we walked across the schoolyard holding hands in the open, in the daylight, where the whole school could see. Students looked. They always would. But their looking did not run her anymore. A year before, that walk across the yard would have been impossible. She would have dropped my hand at the first stare. I would have let her, glad to disappear. Now we just walked and let the school adjust. The real change mattered more than Lydia leaving. Ayana walked through the whispers without checking them, without adjusting her face to fit them. She had stopped asking the crowd for permission. The whispers did not stop. Whispers never really stop. What changed was that they had lost their grip on her. She had learned the secret the powerful never want you to learn, that a crowd only owns you if you let it. Kenji caught up to us, grinning, and pretended to take our picture, announcing it was for the evidence archive, the historical record of the most dangerous fake boyfriend the school had ever produced. I told him I would block his number and erase him from every festival file he had ever touched. He said I did not have the access. I said I knew a guy. Ayano laughed, the easy laugh, free and real. Later, she came with me to the cheap diner near my job, the one with the cracked seats and the soup that costs almost nothing. She ordered the cheap soup. She ate it like it was the best thing she had ever had. I had served 100 girls like the old Ayano in places like that, watched them wrinkle their noses at the menu. Watching this Ayano eat that soup and meet her smile, I understood she had really changed. She said it beat every fancy cafe she had ever sat in with Lydia. Every gold-lit table covered in food no one touched. I told her she was just hungry. She said maybe. Then she said no. It was the company. I believed her. We talked for an hour in that diner about nothing important. Her favorite films, my mother's recipes, the classes she liked, all the ordinary things the contract never had a clause for, things that were everything. Across the street, I saw Mina pass on the far sidewalk. She saw us too. She did not come over. She just stopped and gave Ayano a small, careful bow, the kind you give someone you respect from a distance. Ayano looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded back, small and even. Not a restored friendship. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But an honest first step, taken by two people who both knew exactly what it had cost. We left the diner as the evening light went gold over the street. My apron was still in my bag. My mother was still sick. The rent was still due. None of the hard things had magically gone away, but I was not invisible anymore, and Ayano was not a picture anymore. And the contract that had started as a cage had ended, somehow, as the strangest door I ever walked through into a real life. At the corner, she reached over and took my hand first, before I could, without checking who was watching. The girl who once bought a boy to play this part was now just holding on, because she wanted to. My mother asked me weeks later who the girl was who kept coming by after my shifts. I told her it was a long story that started with a very bad contract. She smiled and said, "The best ones usually do." The contract is somewhere in a drawer in my flat. Still, I kept it, not as a wound, as a reminder. It is the page that tried to buy my silence and accidentally taught me the exact value of my own voice. And that, in the end, was the whole story. Not a poor boy who got rich, not a quiet boy who got revenge, just a person who refused to be bought, and a girl who chose to stop performing, walking home together. So that is where I will leave us. Two people walking home under a gold sky, one apron in a bag, one hand finding another by choice. Not a fairy tale, something better than that. Because it was real.